Welcome to the first week of our course on linguistic and academic assessment for bilingual learners. I am Elena Sada, your instructor, and I am very happy to have the opportunity to learn along with you on this important topic. As we begin, I suggest you keep this video on screen or on a tab while you keep Blackboard open as well, since you will go back and forth, especially as we go over some housekeeping items. And I suggest you also have a notebook at hand. I'll start by saying that, as you can notice, I have an accent. I've been blessed to use several languages in my life, and I have an accent in all of them. I'm not sure how that happened. But if you cannot understand or have a question, please just let me know. I do not take offense at all. So today we will talk about our method, the method for this online course, how to find resources, and the capstone project due at the end of the course. Secondly, we're going to introduce the main theme, which is assessment for bilingual learners. So we will talk about who these bilingual learners are, and then we're going to introduce the topic on assessment and explain how we have structured the content of this course. Based on that information, maybe you can pause now and jot down some ideas of what your objectives for today's session are. It's important to do this so that we can go back to them at the end of the session, see if you accomplished them, and what you would have liked to have accomplished, so that you can give me feedback and we can continue improving every week. So whichever your specific objectives for today are, this is the general objective that I have set up for today's session. We want to have a clear roadmap. We will understand by the end of today what is expected in this course and how we will get there. I believe that one of the factors for success in an online course is to be organized. I have calculated that if you spend 2 hours, or we spend 2 hours doing this online session, and then another 2 or 3 hours doing the reading and the assignment, the capstone, you will be successful. That's my commitment. So if this is not happening by the second or third week, let me know so that we can make some adjustments. So this leads to the resources that we will use for the course. Everything you need will be in Blackboard within this course in the first 3 tabs: syllabus, who we are, and week by week content, in addition to our main page, which is the announcements. And this is the case because assignments, discussion boards, tasks, there's a link for all these within each week. As you can see, for example, here we have 1 week, week 1, which begins August 27, and the tasks within that week are included as links. Also within each week, you will find the readings, both the required readings for that session and the recommended additional readings. So notice the difference, because if you might find it overwhelming to try to cover it all within a week. Do cover the required readings, and then the recommended readings are for you to scan them and see what can be handy later for your project or later for your professional life. Or even to expand on the content if something was not clear enough during this session that I'm providing. So when talking about the course's expectations, of course we have to cover assignments and scoring. The course grade will include 2 main components. One will be the weekly participation, and the second one is the end of the course capstone. So for weekly participation, it will account for 70 points. And this will mean that every week we will be engaged, not only in viewing the videos that I'm preparing, but also carrying on the tasks and discussions that each video indicate. Each week's journal and discussion board will account for 2 points, and the synopsis will be 3 points. So maybe it helps to think of the synopsis as something you do at the end, like a summary, highlighting all the main ideas learned throughout the session, and to demonstrate your knowledge and your learning, you can use any format that you prefer. You can change every week, or you can do the same one every week. It's up to you. You can do a recording, a video or audio recording, a slide that you can use later for a PD. Just jot it down in a journal, which can be handwritten or online. It can be a diagram or a drawing, a tweet, a post. This synopsis, as I wrote, does not have to exhaust every single idea that you learned, but the main ideas. And it's a great tool to use when you create your capstone, because if you just look at all 13 synapses, you will be able to articulate the learning of the course. And the end of the course capstone will account for 30 points. This is not due until the end of the course, December 9th, though we will have the opportunity to talk about it during week 5 and then again during week 13. So the capstone project is in assignments, also within week 14. And it has the following timeline. We need to choose one by week 4 so that we can discuss in a live session during week 5 and then do an oral presentation of the capstone on December 2nd during week 13 to be able to submit it on week 14, the last session. And this is where I'm not conventional at all. I believe I'm a fan of self-assessment, and I don't see it as a way to avoid having to score. I do still give as much feedback and do exactly the same process as if I were scoring, but I stick to your own score and I give you feedback about the way you score yourself. I think that this is the best way for professionals to take ownership of their own learning. And this is also something that is extremely helpful when applied to bilingual learners. So as you can see in the syllabus, your rationale for your assessment will be part of your final project. So at this point, 10 minutes into the video, you might want to pause, look at these ideas, and assimilate them and start thinking about which one might accommodate your own professional goals best so that you can start focusing in the creation of one of these options. This slide contains only the title of the option. However, for more information or more specifics about the possibility, you can look at the assignment in Blackboard. There are numerous textbooks that we could be using for this course. However, I chose these two because I believe they cover the foundation of the topic very well. They will not be the only source that you will want to access. During our sessions, we'll try to do some investigation that you will find engaging as you apply it to your own specific professions. However, these ones contain all the foundations so that we know for sure that we're covering our grounds. Furthermore, Margot Godliev and Wayne Wright have decades of experience, specifically with English learners, assessing English learners, developing parameters, performance indicators for language learners. And both are practitioners in addition to being researchers. As language teachers, many of us are fans of Vygotsky, whose research proposed that thought and language are part of the same cognitive process. So just like Vygotsky, our own experience and research has led us to have, as teachers and professors, our own philosophy. It's something we cannot escape from, and we cannot deny the fact that we share a little bit of this philosophy with our students when we teach. However, to be ethical, there has to be a disclaimer, and this is my disclaimer about English learners. I call them bilingual learners. I clarify in the syllabus that I humbly propose this name as a way to highlight not what students are lacking, which is English, but what students offer to society, a parallel culture and language. And also I indicate that this choice does not intend to undermine bilingual learners' need to become proficient in the English language and culture, which is our society's common language and culture. Furthermore, it does not intend to undermine your own philosophy or your own preference. If, for example, you choose to call them English learners just for the practicity of it, I will not take offense once again or make any judgment about it. However, because of the connection between thought and language, it is part of this course to reflect about the way we think of English learners and how we decide to address them. So let's pause and go to our discussion on the way we decide each of us to address them. And it's in Blackboard, it's reflection 1 for week 1. You will find the link in the same folder. And since we learn better through social interactions, this is where we are encouraged to do a shout out. It could be in the form of a blog where you ask people in one of your groups in any social media which do you think is the best way to address these students, or you simply turn to your spouse or call a friend and ask them, or a fellow teacher, and discuss it, and then write in the discussion board what was the conclusion of that dialogue. So we move along and we start thinking about who these bilingual learners are. How do the authors describe them? Pause once again and see if you can jot down some ideas of specific characteristics of or ways of describing these students. So I came up with these 5 bullets. First, these are students who are learning English as an additional language. We could also say second language, but sometimes it's a third or even fourth language. Also, these are students who qualify for additional linguistic and academic support in English. It is the fastest growing population in the States, and most of them were born in the United States and are very diverse from diverse backgrounds. And many times their main challenge is not social language, but acquiring academic language. So now that we have reflected on our philosophy and the perception of this population of either bilingual or English learners or culturally and linguistically diverse students, we can now start our conversation about the assessment that is appropriate for bilingual learners. I would like to start with 2 premises. One is that language is the primary tool for mental representation, for cognition. This is very much Vygotsky's style. And if that's the case, teaching language is very much a matter of equity, an idea that Gottlieb emphasizes in this first chapter of her book. The second premise is that assessments have 2 main functions. One is they project learning, they demonstrate or show learning. And the second is that assessments expand learning. Meaningful assessments are always at the service of learning. And if for any reason during these videos ideas come up with which you disagree or don't quite grasp, please feel free to include them in Blackboard or send me an email. It is very, very helpful. In addition to the premises I mentioned, we can say that the author's philosophy is that reliable, valid, and meaningful assessment data gathered from multiple sources and perspectives allows to accrue evidence over time to make informed educational decisions. It is a packed paragraph, but I'm including it because it represents in a holistic way what will be the road that we will be covering in this class in regards to assessment. We will talk about the characteristics of a reliable, valid, and meaningful assessment for English learners or bilingual learners. We will speak about how we need multiple sources and provide some examples and gather some examples, as well as investigate different assessments that we can use or teachers that we train can use. And finally, this course considers that assessing both languages, first and second language, or home language and English, is fundamental in order to foster equity. So when a bilingual learner enters the district or the school, we assess them in both languages. And the assessment of their home language should continue, of course, if they enter a bilingual program. You probably know from my bio that I was a supervisor of dual language and ESL programs in New Rochelle, New York. And when students will enter kindergarten or pre-K, we would assess them in both their home language and English. And sometimes we would find, as the slide shows, that their first language or their home language, while they were very proficient, they were not in English. And sometimes the opposite occurred, that they were lower in their home language than in English. Other times they were the same. And we would assess this by giving them the same test both in English and in Spanish simultaneously. And we would let them respond first in one language, and whenever they would not find the answer, they would have the option of saying it in Spanish and vice versa, which after training, the teachers were able to assess what they could perform in both and what they could perform only in one of the languages. This is a method that I highly encourage other districts or teachers to use. This leads us to our second reflection in week's 1 discussion. If you can reflect on why do you think it is convenient to assess in both languages, or if you don't agree, why do you think that's the case? So take some time to reply in Blackboard. As we move forward the following weeks, we will focus on formal and informal assessments, so teacher-made versus standardized assessments, etc. So in order to wrap up the topic of classification and reclassification of bilingual learners, I will just like to point out the need for multiple measures according to the authors in order to reclassify bilingual learners. So they speak about large-scale measures that we already know, for example, the last links here used in Connecticut, but also classroom measures. And interestingly, they talk about student self-assessment as well as a way to determine reclassification. So if you could please pause and reflect on what this would look like. Visualize allowing students in secondary education or upper elementary have a say in their need for additional ESL or their readiness to go into mainstream classroom. What would the advantages be and what would the risks be? This is important because we will go back to the topic of self-assessment over and over again as a very important way to adapt their instruction and assessment for bilingual learners. So we will see that a comprehensive assessment system for bilingual learners is a balance of assessment on language and content through large-scale and classroom measures for information and accountability and instruction. In other words, the what is language and content, the how is through large-scale and classroom measures, and why is information for both accountability and a better instruction. With this, we reach our conclusion. We see that our general objective was to have a clear roadmap. So hopefully now we understand what is expected in this course and how we will get there. Now it's time for your first synopsis. And as you might remember, we can choose from any of the following formats in order to summarize and showcase the highlights of what we learned today. Remain watching for a sample that I prepared after a short class on fonts of knowledge.